Some people are descended from flies, they are always attracted to shit. A few days ago, a new pretentious fart with a graphon was released, cooler than in real life and with systems like a new spaceship. Layers of Fur is a remake. So stop. What a remake. And what was the first part? And it wasn't just there, but at one time even someone managed to play it. I was among these 2.5 lucky ones. I was completely delighted, despite the fact that I fell asleep an hour after the prologue, and did not return to the game anymore. Well, since the remake has already been dropped, why not dip it into the polished version of this masterpiece again? In the story, we roamed for the drunken artist, a pretty native image for any Russian. This is an artist lover of abstract objects, tormented by remorse for eating his wife. Conflict is quite typical in countries with a demographic hole and the promotion of family values, so this is a common thing for us. That's how they say a lot. They stick kids for a mate. Capital. And then they start writing rap and get carried away with democracy. I think for most of my viewers, there is nothing like that here. This is a common situation in the family. But in the West, where it is a mortal sin to raise your hand against a woman even in a dream, and not a love flirt, the game is wildly praised for a social statement, which is not here. The man is a doll, he just ruined his life with a grumpy woman. And what a game it is. These fighters for women's rights don't really care. Don't show them the position of women in Arab countries. The poor things are not ready for this yet. Of course, the levels are wildly diverse, but for some reason they all look like each other. Probably the author's idea, especially considering that the whole game, which is a long 4 hours, we wander only around the mansion and the basement. Ah, no wonder many have not saved up for Crimea and Sochi yet, and their grandmother in the village went on a spree, so in the summer they have to get out to their own basement and catch fish there. In principle, other levels are not needed when there are 2 rooms with the same texture, but the main feature is that the levels change and rebuild right in front of your eyes in real time. The same effect can be caught in real life if you drink water from a village well and eat it with honeydew. It's dangerous to do that. Since the main character was under something powerful, his whole game is buggy, and only lets go at the end. The magic of cider is no different. For once, we were given not a cute fashionista with a comb, but a real man with real problems. And now it's been a miserable 10 years which have passed like one day, and the brilliant Polish developers surprised us as they once did. All these 10 years we just sat and waited for a remake. Such a brilliant game. To understand all its depths and hidden meanings, you don't even need to play it. It's enough to watch this review to the end. Only geniuses are capable of such games. They managed to make a simple and stuffy game even easier and stuffier than everyone else is doing right now, although it would seem much narrower. The main character this time is some kind of offended schmuck who is longing and looking not for his wife, but for some guy. Yes, in 10 years, of course, a lot has changed in the world. They used to look for a wife, now they are looking for guys. Progressive. We are still wandering around the empty mansion and its surroundings, which look more like a grandmother's barn in the village than the elite mansion of a rich artist. The entire fortune was spent on holes in the walls and catacombs in the basements. Yeah, we used to walk through this basement to Berlin at one time. The glitches are primitive, and if the levels used to change a lot, now at most some kind of ladder or stool will change, which you won't notice the first time. Too much change can put pressure on a player who has only recently learned that it is possible to go to the shower. In general, all the emphasis was placed on beautiful graphics. And what's beautiful about her, you ask? I do not know. It's just written in the description of the game and the text that the developers sent me. Oh BL, don't hit me. Not to say that the graphics are straight soap and with a billion unnecessary effects means there is nothing to say. The creators are rolling out a new revolutionary engine, Unreal Engine 5. Its main feature is that the graphics are like in games 10 years ago, but at the same time the computer resources are consumed 1,000 times more. What an innovation! And you say there is no progress in modern games. I'll start with the main thing. These same Polish developers from Germany released in 2017 the Divine Game Observer about cyberpunk, and a dad who is looking for his drug addict son along the neon-drenched streets of the Polish city of the future. Along the way, looking into other people's thoughts and being blown away by what is happening there. The graphics were revolutionary, the plot was mind-blowing, and the atmosphere and graphics are better than in all cyberpunk games. And this masterpiece sold poorly, and the developers bought a big bag of money on the cheap, and the studio began to have a crisis and difficult everyday life. Each of their subsequent games is a stuffy, boring, and insipid mess. Naturally, with a divorce to realistic graphon which they always forget to optimize. And the new Layers of the Firm is not a game, it's a glossy techno demka to present all the beauties of the new HYIP engine. Lazy developers are just rolling out a new engine, trying out new features, but they have the audacity to call it a new game and sell it for $50. The funny thing is that the game runs like the original in 4 hours, and this is what we've been doing for 4 years. An hour of gameplay per year. These are exorbitant speeds. The creators thought that unusual locations, interesting characters and a deep story can be replaced with Graphon and a new non-optimized engine that will only pull a computer for 200,000 rubles. But for some reason everyone liked it. The game has cool ratings and it's now kind of the most successful game in the studio. But I'm sad, by running the old horror movies, you got more than just 10 minutes of sitting under the table, waiting for the next babeka to pass by you. It was necessary to use your brain to be smart, and now everything is simple and clear. The game is absolutely rail-aced. It isn't possible to get lost here, because the locations themselves are small rooms, without any unique features. This begs the question, why does the original 10 years ago look more lively and interesting than its remake? Because in the remake we have a cool Graphon, which means it's cooler by definition. Separately, I would like to say about music, you know this feeling when you went to the toilet, and during the storming of a ceramic vessel you begin to remember the most intense skirmishes on dust, and the corresponding pathos of the same type of music begins to play, which is now customary to shove into any trailer of a new movie, even if it is a melodrama. Well, yes, normal music will allow us to feel something and immerse ourselves in the game, but here you can immerse yourself only in longing, walking along the same type of corridors, and collecting the keys to go further. It's just a Stone Age level. Why not make an interesting gameplay to diversify the levels, to offer something new and unusual at each one? Because an hour later, the new layers of the firm is getting tired and running out of steam. You will no longer see anything interesting and unusual. You will wander in the semi-darkness and read notes. After all, what could be more exciting in modern expensive graphene games? Why add something new if they already do? Who needs risks if you can spit out and sell the same game every year? Just changing the scenery. That's what happened to games in horror in particular. They just take a moldy scheme, pull a laggy and buggy graph on it, and think that they've done everything. And the most amazing thing is that they all eat it and ask for more. What's wrong with this world? Horror is one of the most unique and unusual genres. It allows you to feel like a hunted animal and get a lot of drive and adrenaline. But instead, we are fed outdated cliches and stereotypes. How in the 90s we walked through a gloomy mansion with ghosts, which is now, in 2023. Maybe someone will tell them that it's time to develop, it's time to experiment, it's time to add at least something new. Why do people play horror games? To get vivid emotions. I'll never forget how I ran away from the Trager in the Outlast, or how I was under the trash in the first Manhunt, or how I first jumped into nightmares in The Observer, how I was first hit by a power tower in the second Outlast. I remember these moments more clearly than what happened to me last week in real life, and I would say that these impressions were much brighter than the greater number of days lived. And then an arrogant publisher just came and forces talented guys to rivet some kind of horror story for children of the level of Slender and Poppy Playtime, which is played extremely clumsily. The controls are not responsive, there are a lot of bugs, objects are stuck in the walls, and the hero talks to himself with his mouth closed, and this is probably a trick. Then okay, Babeka, instead of scaring us, falls into some kind of astral in the wall. The texture of the chandelier disappears from the ceiling and just one lamp is lit. You hear some whispers in the attic, and when you go to the toilet, they end. Of course, maybe it's all meant to be, I would like to believe. Why not add interesting riddles or something illogical? And let's have the whole game be one corridor, where the most difficult puzzle is not to find a passage 2 centimeters from the door. I was also pleased with the action movie. It's one out and a ghost crawls at you. You hold the button, shine a lamp on it, and it disappears for a while. It just freezes the blood in your veins, right? The main twist of the game is that the main character is a murderer himself, and the endless mansion is just a figment of his imagination. It took me an hour of playing to figure it out. Okay, maybe this story will develop somehow. And why? The mansion is amazing. As soon as the hero begins to guess, they end. That's a really strong philosophical thought. And what if I tell you that the hero's wife was killed not by himself, but by someone else, and the hero just threw off a sense of guilt that he did not save her? We saw something similar in the current novelty of 2023, Max Payne, which was released only 22 years ago. No. Well, in my opinion this twist is for all time. Why not use it again? And now it's too expensive and difficult to come up with your own and new ones. That's not relevant. Why, if you can take someone else's? And now there is a question, why was this same game more interesting 10 years ago than it is now? Don't think about it listening to endless voices in your head and touching doors and objects. It's certainly a lot of fun, but it used to be kind of atmospheric and there were no such horrors 10 years ago. And now it's the same thing, it's a broken record. Take the same graphics, right? It used to be more interesting because it was crisp and low-detailed. Plus there was no fog and distant drawing. We saw everything at arm's length and our brain was drawing up the women and the horrors ahead. There is no such effect now. It may seem that it does not exist because we have an almost identical game with a cooler graphon. Those who, like me, played the original will not see almost anything new here, only there is more empty chatter that does not affect anything, as well as walking with the same type of rooms, which I bet the script generated, and not the creators themselves. They are all very similar and unmemorable. How much should you try to make sure that after completing an expensive game, you forget about what was in it an hour after the credits? I think it's a real talent to make such a bland thing, of which the main menu is the most vivid and unusual thing that was in the game. Usually they try to scare us in horror. Who would have thought to scare us? There are noises, scary sounds, or monsters. But when these noises you hear them all the time, you will quickly get used to them, and they will stop scaring. Just like monsters, if these monsters are dumb and easy to escape from. So horror can quickly turn into a comedy. Screamers are not needed here, but why? The atmosphere should scare the player. And what's so scary about it? Well, we didn't shake the mechanisms in any other game and didn't wander from one room to another. We didn't read the notes when I was young, I had a squash, or in the next life, I want to go to Kazakhstan. All these memoirs of a mentally retarded person reminded me of my own life, and the Joker trap that I fell into many years ago. I think every year sucks, and then when it's over, I think how cool it was, because the next year will be more boring. That's how the hero is. He yearns, refixes and remembers how cool it was when he and his wife walked their loud daughter on the next lawn, whose name he had already forgotten and did not remember her until he started to freak out and hear voices. You must agree that this is a big problem for the modern world. I think the point of the game is to live now, and not wait for your schizophrenia to subside, and you will find an end in the endless maze of your fears and resentments. Through all these allegories and deep meanings between our legs, they try to tell us that our life is fleeting, and while we are looking for who is to blame, instead of taking it for granted, we are just wasting time. Behind the familiar images, there is an emptiness, a spiritual emptiness, because behind a bottle of alcohol, we lost ourselves and now we are trying to find it, without dying along the way. Of course, the thought is very deep, but except for me, a lover of searching for meanings where there are none, in this nonsense of incomprehensible symbols and signs, no one will do this. Therefore, the target audience consists of soy baristas and buzzers who think that only the Joker and Fight Club are deeper than Evangelion. No one will understand the morality and meaning of the game. And if you do not want to search in the stream of mentally ill thoughts, you will quickly abandon the game and return to it. After the stuffy Outlast 3 will seem even more impetuous and cringeworthy to you than the new hit Blubber TM. On one side of the scale, we have stuffiness and boredom, and on the other, a deep philosophical statement, a couple of good screamers that can make your knees sweat and your soul clog, a deep thought about the importance of family and mental balance, and on the other inflated systems and a duration that only a bored goofball with free time like me can master. Daddies from the factory are passing by again and most simply will not appreciate the monotonous immersion in madness. And despite my criticism, I like the game. I just want the next games to be less pretentious and cliched. It is clear that this is not decided by the creators, but by publishers who literally stand with their backs with a gun, and force them to rivet something that sells well, without bothering about something unusual and non-standard, doing everything according to one formula which brings money. Yes, these people have not even played games. I doubt that they can read and articulate their thoughts. But the polls still showed that they can make a hybrid game that will please both the publisher and such overeager snobs, lovers of hidden meaning like me. Therefore, well done. I hope the next game, which will be released very soon, in 4 years, will be much more dynamic and intense than the new layers of for Remake 2023. At the moment, this is the scariest horror game of 2023. Not as scary as the prices of groceries in the store, but still capable of scaring the unprepared for the horrors of family life, a modern buzzer, and a lover of healthy life, a hipster. After all, some scenes are rife with obscenity, but quite mild so that this game can still be sold to the youngest age group. Well, that's it. This is just my opinion. Play for yourself, make up your own, or let's wait another 10 years for a new remake of the Remake, which will fix all bugs and drawdowns up to 10 frames, on consoles and the most powerful video cards. They say this is a feature of new games, but what do you think? Write in the comments.